Hello, guys, and welcome to my Denver Broncos 7 round mock draft. So, yesterday I will tell you that I intentionally took the day off. We've been moving things around the house to try and sell it, long the story short. So, but now we're going to resume with our 2 a day sort of thing. Today we have the Broncos, and then we have the Texans, and then we only have 2 more days, to do this, where it's going to be Steelers, Vikings, and then Chargers, Packers to finish off all of our 7 rounders. And inevitably, that means that on Friday, I'm going to try to do some research, and I'm going to really try to get down and gritty. With kind of my breakdown, it'll be sort of a brief breakdown of what my top prospects at each, skill position at least. So running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, in case you are unaware of what skill position means. QBs as well, obviously, but skill position, I think they more so mean like these guys that are getting the yards, with the ball in their hands. Obviously, QBs can with the ball in their hands, but it's not prototypical for it to be that way. But without further ado, we're going to look at their roster real quick for Denver. I think this is a team that we were surprised last year by how they performed. And I think that this year things can go up for them, but we've got some apparent glaring stuff to address. They need another wide receiver. I liked how Marvin Mims started getting used more. Courtland Sutton is still very good. He was top 5 in terms of getting first downs on third down type of thing last year. I'm pretty sure. Very, very good still. They'd be fools to get rid of him, like some people have said. These other guys, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of like, oh, who cares? To be honest, not to be rude, but who cares? Then their line, they have Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, and then Mike McGlinchey. One of my favorite names in the NFL, side note. Moving on to tight end, they bring in Ingram. I think that's huge. I think that Trotman was good last year, but I think they bring in Ingram, who's a true pass catcher tight end. Was one of the kind of, I wouldn't say bright spots, but was one of the consistent Trevor Lawrence targets last year in Jacksonville. One of the reasons I'm like, why the hell did they get rid of this guy? He's obviously not like the ripe age that he used to be. But he's still, a big, tall target that can, catch the ball and do good things. Bo Nix at QB, obviously that won't change. At running back, you have Jaleel McLaughlin and then Audric Estime. I do foresee them drafting a running back. And, that could be at any point in this draft, as there's many, many running backs at multiple different stages in the draft. Looking at the defense, we have Zach Allen, DJ Jones, and John Franklin Myers. I think that, it's a solid D-line. I think that they do grab sort of a guy, to be sort of a, defensive interior guy as like a depth piece type of thing, because they only have 8 guys here. Looking at their linebacker, their edge rushers, Jonathan Cooper, and then Nick Bonito. Obviously, the interesting thing about this defense is they did account for, I think, the most sacks in the league, in terms of a defense type of thing, which I just didn't see them doing, to be honest with you. But, they did very well. Dre Greenlaw, huge pickup here. And then Alex Singleton. I think that Alex Singleton has really always been kind of around the ball type of dude. And then you bring in Dre Greenlaw, who can be around the ball. And you get him on a good deal. Not that that's huge with the depth piece or, playing consistency of the defense, but I think that you have a lot of guys here that are able to be around the ball and make plays on the ball and, defend very well. Looking at corners, we got Pat Surtain, reigning Defensive Player of the Year. well deserved, to be honest with you. Brandon Jones, Hufanga from San Fran, who obviously left in free agency. And then on the, Nickelback, Jaquan McMillan, I like Jaquan McMillian, and then Riley Moss. Obviously two guys that it's like, are still younger in the league. I mean, hell, Pat Surtain is still young. This guy is going to be around, for a while, that sort of thing. I could see them drafting a corner. They obviously kind of have enough here, but they could draft kind of a young corner to add more competition. I think that, you also look at, to me, you also kind of look at safety for them potentially, just to make sure. But other than that, on the defensive side, I don't think you need, you might bring in an edge rusher, even though this team had the most sacks, but it was kind of, wild how they were getting so many sacks. So it's like my biggest needs for this team, and it's like Bo Nix was pretty well protected last year. So it's like the O-line isn't really that huge of a deal. I think wide receivers probably their biggest need, followed by running back. Running back has been signed. That's like, then they kind of cleaned house this offseason, or let guys go, to clean house. Then you have defensive interior, maybe a rusher and a corner and a safety. Kind of the, positions of need. But without further ado, we'll start the draft. We'll see how many picks they have. They do only have 7 picks, only 7. It's obviously a standard amount. But, with that being said, I think that, the Denver Broncos can have a very interesting draft path type of thing. Looking here at number 20, the first thing that I notice is that we have, goodness, it's kind of interesting. We have both Mike Green and Starks. Starks, to me, a kind of a person that it's like, it seems like he's inevitable to drop, as safety isn't like a top need. The only teams that you look above this that have safety need are the Colts, the Bears, who it's like could definitely go safety. And then it's like you look at all these other ones, and the Jaguars. So it's like only 3 teams, but I guess none in the position to really be like, hey, we should grab this guy, type of thing. And it's like not a big enough need. It's interesting here with Denver that they put running back as first, wide receiver second, center and defensive interior, which are kind of needs that I said that they, could have. But it's like, I think that you look at, DB and safety, they were very much helped by the pass rush. Obviously, Surtain was still just playing like he was everywhere, which is hard for an outside DB to do. But you kind of look at this and you think, maybe we should go Luther Burden. Maybe we should go, just, they could go edge. They could go James Pierce. They could even, if they really wanted to double down on tight end, I don't know. I don't think Sean Payton would do this, but you could grab Colston Loveland, Siobhan Revel on the rise, and it's, just kind of one of those interesting situations where it's like, do you trade down? Do you get more picks? And then you pick a guy like Jaden Higgins, who is on the rise, type of situation. I wouldn't mind that either. But Malachi Starks would not be a bad pickup here. I think that he could be a guy that you put down low too, and is just such a good athlete that it's kind of like, look at these other kind of guys here. You could go Igbuka here, obviously. You could go Hampton, which I've seen at this spot, type of thing. I think that Hampton, obviously not bad production these last 2 years, has the size to be a workhorse back, 22 years old. You could even easily have kind of a guy that's going to produce, that played for, a pretty good collegiate school and that sort of thing. But it's like, that can also receive the football. So it's like, does Sean Payton value that? I think that he potentially would, but I just think that, at this point, you're kind of looking, You're looking at all these other guys, and it's like you could go Luther Burden, an electric slot guy. And it's like, I don't think it would be outside the expertise of Sean Payton to have like two slots like Mims and Burden, type of thing that are both electric and both could make, have big play potential, from the slot, type of thing. So it's kind of an interesting pick. Here's what I'm actually going to do. I am going to go ahead and draft Luther Burden just because I think that maybe Starks isn't on their radar, and it's like they need a wide receiver. They need a kind of guy that's like a game changer type of thing. And Luther Burden can also line up outside, He did so his first year. I guess he didn't have as much production and that sort of thing. But this is a guy that can line up outside. He's big enough that he can be strong enough to be outside type of thing. Five tool athlete, need I say more? We're going to go ahead and draft Burden here to the Broncos just because it is such a need type of thing. And it's like, even in round 2 here, it's like, if they really wanted a safety, Xavier Watts would be a guy that if he dropped this far, I would be saying, take this guy. Take this guy as a good size, a little bit older, but, played for a big school and was all over the place, And it's like, was all over the place and had his highest graded year as being used as kind of a guy that can, it's like, fake blitz, do a lot of things, in my opinion. So it's like, this is a guy that, they could go. I do think, Siobhan Revel would be a nice complement opposite of Patrick Surtain type of thing. And, but it's like you also look here and we have Cam Scatabo. I think Scatabo, has very good potential, being very crazy elusive, but is a size that it's like you're not going to have to worry about him too much. Chip on his shoulder, his mentality, that sort of thing. And I always feel like, that it's one of those things that this is a guy that Sean Payton would like, chip on his shoulder type of thing, always wanting to kind of prove the doubters wrong. And it's like, and he can also receive. So we're actually going to go Scatabo here. We're going to address kind of their two biggest needs according to PFF, but I do think they are their biggest needs type of thing, and then it's like we go to round 3. So interestingly enough, I think that Kyle Williams being here at this pick is kind of miraculous. He's ranked 73. This guy is he's smaller type of thing, but you can't tell me that if you're revamping the wide receivers, perhaps you do want to get another outside guy like Kyle Williams. Very good contested catch rate despite the lack of size, obviously against, less than premier talent, but he still did very, very good, and he was kind of a deep ball sort of guy, and I think this is like what Sean Payton really likes, a smart wide receiver here, and, targeted a lot, drop rate is a little concerning type of thing, but I think with Bo Nix, who's an accurate passer, he can get it where, Kyle Williams most likes it most, type of thing. I'm actually going to go and we're going to double down on wide receiver because I think that they need another guy to be like outside somewhat, and then they can, they can really be, well and done with a wide receiver and that sort of thing. Now looking on to round 4, perhaps, looking here, we didn't take a corner, and that sort of thing. And I am kind of looking for that. Or maybe you do go for, I see we have a JJ Pegs here. Good pass rush win rate for a guy who has a solid run defense rate and just below 9% type of thing. This is very good for a guy who obviously big in size, very, very good. relentless play and that sort of thing. I think that he's a guy that you bring in and it's like he melds well with the rest of the D line and pass rush on this team, and you address a need in here as well. Moving down to round 6, we have the 3 picks left, because we obviously all 3 in round 6, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of take who you want right here, because your next picks are, you have 3 picks of the 17 of 17. With the next 17 picks, you have 3. So it's interesting. I think here, we're kind of looking. We have center and defensive interior. I think, it's always a safe assessment to say that these guys can go from, guard to center potentially. It has really, really good size. Obviously needs more strength, but has a very solid pass block grade. It's not like his run block grade is, terrible type of thing. His gap is, but, obviously very good protection. He's played at left guard and right guard, no center, but I think it's something to say that, like, you want to have protection for your QB, and a guy like this, you could maybe groom him to play center, which is a need, potentially, because, it looks like he was the only sort of, like, interior O-lineman in the talent range that we have here. It's kind of interesting to me that, we do have Jake Majors here. I think that Jake Majors, playing for a major school and that sort of thing, very good pass block as well. And, I guess similar size, a little bit shorter, but still very, very tall, and played a lot of snaps last year with a high grade. Let up some hurries type of thing, a couple of hits, no sacks in the last 2 years of, just under 2K snaps type of thing. But, this is looking very good. And I say draft Drake Mabers, double down on the interior of the O-line. And at this point, we've drafted double wide receiver, double interior O-line, halfback, and a defensive interior. I'm kind of thinking, that we do look, potentially, at corner or, safety type of thing. So, I said we could address edge, but, maybe we see that it wasn't that much of a fluke. And we're going to go through a few of these guys. Average depth of run tackle. This does not look like the guy that they would pick. Not very good. Wondering why he's ranked this high, to be honest with you. Obviously played slot, box, and deep. A lot of missed tackles. I just don't think that that's something that'll be kind of looked at. Elijah Clark. We have here small safety. They need a strong safety. Katen Crawford is someone that I do like. Obviously, these first couple of years, they didn't play him a lot here, and they didn't play him a lot, the year before, but once he had a full plate of snaps at 851, we saw quite a bit here where it's like box, deep, and slot. Versatile, good incompletion rate. Average depth of run tackle is 12 yards, but obviously he lined up deep most of the time. But Katen Crawford looks like a guy who's a stockier, kind of pounded sort of guy, and it's like the missed tackle percentage is kind of bad, but it's like, I think that this guy has good size. We'll still look at some of these other guys to see if, hey, they match up well, or they look like a guy who can play. That guy looks like he's injury prone. I don't know about that. We have RJ Mickens, who, does have higher missed tackle rate, but he also has very good, forced incompletion and at 0.9% beneath 25%. So it's like box, deep, slot. This guy can play everywhere. Is a very good size. So, I'm actually thinking we're gonna go RJ Mickens, who, looks like he has experience, and he looked like he was on the come up last year. Obviously, double the missed tackles from the prior year. 200, 220 more snaps type of thing. Run defense snaps was a little bit higher of a workload type of thing, but we're gonna go RJ Mickens out of Clemson to be the final pick for this Denver Broncos team, because I think that they could, further solidify their DB room. But long story short, tell me what you guys think about this. Whether or not you would, draft Kyle Williams. I feel like he was ranked a little bit lower last week, and they've been updating this. But it's kind of one of those interesting things that, coming close to the draft, these guys kind of move around quite a bit, which makes, doing these mock drafts really pretty fun. So I think with this, I think it's over. So we drafted Scatabo, but then they said Siobhan Revel. See what I mean is that they do think that they need DBs on this, and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, take a look here, and you guys can see whether or not you would go and potentially, grab anybody else, that was available. Obviously, I theorized Malachi Starks, and he went immediately afterwards. But it's kind of interesting. So tell me what you guys think. And as always, go Pack Go.